Hello and welcome to another live stream edition of the John Keim Report. Do me a favor, subscribe to the show wherever you get your podcast. You're watching on YouTube, hit that like button, hit that subscribe button. You can find us there as part of Ampire Media. That's Ampire. Always much appreciated when you tune in. And don't forget, you can always read my work on ESPN.com. Well, I'm going to have a story up sometime in the next day or two about the possible impact, the potential impact of Zach Ertz and Austin Eckler for Jayden Daniels. And also a couple programming notes. We're going to have podcasts the rest of the week. I have one with the beat reporters, Ben Standig, Nikki Javala, JP Finley, Mitch Tisler. And we're going to have, that's going to come out Thursday. Going to have a podcast with Jenna Lane, who covers Tampa Bay Bucks. And I'll have another one later as well. Just kind of what I've learned throughout the week. Things, trying to provide as much insight as I can to those of you who follow the team. And then also after the game, I'll be back after the game, wrapping the game up. And, that'll probably come out later in the evening. So I hope you guys are still up. And then finally, Bram, as you can see, Bram Weinstein, the voice of Commanders, has joined me. He and I will be doing these live stream shows on Tuesday nights every week. Let's get going. Bram, week one. What do you think? How do you feel?
You got everybody else on. What do you need me for?
Well, they're the next day.
Week one, I'm ready, man. Listen, we overanalyze and talk and analyze and go through everything a million times. And this is a really unique year. And I kind of just want to see it. I really don't have a lot of preconceived notions. I think this is a very different season than any one that I've ever been a part of. And I've been a part of a lot of them. And I'm really excited to see what it looks like in week one, because I really am genuinely curious at what this team is, what they're about, what they're going to become. I think really is what this season to me is about. But at least in the early stages, I don't think we've seen full glimpses of their capabilities and their game planning and their execution. And so all of it is on the table this week.
Well, and I think that's what makes it interesting. I always go back, and it's funny because before we came on, I was going to ask you what your most memorable season opening game is. And it's kind of hard to go past or anybody but Robert for me, right? In 2012, what he did in that first game against the Saints, and it was memorable because of obviously the success that he had, but also because you didn't see all that they showed leading up to it. As we're sitting there, I was there all summer, and you're watching the game, it's like, oh, that's what it's going to look like. And just watching the Saints linebackers kind of trip over themselves to stop the zone read. The first touchdown pass to Pierre Garçon, and it was a play that I was later told just like a year or two ago that they could not execute during the week. That first touchdown to Pierre, I think Pierre was a little bit concerned about what the safety might do on that particular play, and they were having trouble connecting on that. I don't know that, I'm not sure he trusted Robert as much on that one, but it worked in that game. And that was the birth of quite a year, an exciting year. So we'll see, what is in store for Jayden Daniels. But I think this, for a season opener, since that game, this is the most maybe anticipated one. Do you think, Bram?
Yeah. It feels like the beginning of something. I don't know what that something is yet. I have a lot of good vibes around it, and I feel really good about what they're trying to build. And when they talk about this culture change, I see it and feel it. I recognize it. I think it's not just coach talk. You see it, what Dan Quinn and Joe Witt specifically are talking about. You really, really, really see it. Yep. So I'm excited. I don't know, but I don't know what we're going to get. It is year one. They have 30 new players or whatever it is, a whole new system in place. They're practicing what they're doing. We haven't seen what they're doing. No. I think they have vulnerabilities on the roster. I think you're being way too optimistic if you're overlooking some of the potential vulnerabilities here, but I'm really excited. And it does feel like truly the beginning of something new, something exciting. There's a lot of genuine momentum. The infrastructure in and around this is very different than we've had in a generation. So I'm very, very, very excited about all of that. And that's why, I don't want to get too far ahead of myself, but I'm hoping to see good things Sunday, win or lose, honestly.
And it's funny because part of the thing here too, and there's always a comparison to Houston, right? And so you kind of look into it just like, well, what is real and what isn't? What can really compare and what can't? Obviously, you have two rookie quarterbacks. The Texans they hit on Will Anderson too. So you got an impact pass rush, and they had a really good pass rush because of it. But one big thing they talked about leading into that game that season was the impact on the coaching staff, or of the coach staff in the building, and just the vibes, the atmosphere. And then of course you look at the schedule. I think Washington has a harder schedule. I was looking at earlier, and it's hard to know. Like, I'm looking at Houston's schedule after the fact. I think they played one team that made the playoffs in the last 8 games. And that was Cleveland. They lost to them, then they beat them in the playoffs. So I think it's hard to know. Can you compare? I don't know that it's certainly not a wrong wonder, right? Or comparison. It's just that it's a hard thing to do what the Texans did. But there are some similarities, and it was a really good rookie class, and it's potentially a really good rookie quarterback. But the only thing I would say for this is whether or not they repeat what Houston did. If you can look like you built it the right way, right? You've done the right things, and Jayden Daniels is hitting, then it's a good year. And by the way, for those wondering about the Houston comparisons, again, Houston started 0-2. They scored 9 points in the opener. Just remember that Sunday, whatever happens, it's just one game. Just if they score, you know what I mean?
Like the Houston thing's tough. Like,
very tough.
They're in a different division, and Indianapolis was resetting with a rookie quarterback who got hurt early in the season and was projected to be someone who was going to need some time. And then Tennessee was totally transitioning away from a roster that was really good a few years ago, but was transitioning away from that. So this was, if all things went well for them, and it did, a 2-team race. And then all of a sudden they're in that 2-team race, and all they needed was one of them to have a mediocre season, and they got it out of Jacksonville. And then all of a sudden the road opened up for them. Could that happen for the Commanders? Well, the pathway to something like that is Dallas having a mediocre to down to bad season, which, look, I'll hear out. There's plenty of reasons to not think the arrows are pointing up for them. I mean, they didn't sign Dak Prescott as of yet. They're getting a lot of criticism with how they're handling their roster. They added nobody. They lost too many people. They don't look like the same team. There's a lot of bad juju in and around it. Like, if they fall off and have a close to 500 record or somehow below it a little bit, well, guess what? The door's wide open for Washington to take a run at something. And then you need Philadelphia to be Jacksonville last year, the team that is definitively going to win the division, but then for some reason just doesn't. And I think that's a bigger hill to climb than what Houston had a year ago, but we'll see. And I'll just reiterate this, like what Steve is putting, what you just put up here. I want to see signs of progress. So do I. The telling tale to me is, what is this team doing in November and December?
Right.
For assuming health. What are they doing in November, December? What do they look like then? Are they getting better? And are they competitive to the point where we're talking about, well, if they win this one, they're in the playoff hunt. If we're doing that at the end of this year, that is a massive, massive win to me. And I know they kind of don't want to hear it, because I want to hear what you have to say about this. Like, when this thing first started getting rolled out, they used words like recalibration. They didn't want to talk about rebuild. Fine. But they seemed to be grounded in this idea of, we know this is new. We know that it's going to take some time. We don't expect to go win a Super Bowl tomorrow. Like, they were intimating that. Last week, if you listen to Lance Newmark, if you listen to Adam Peters, if you listen to Dan Quinn, they all reiterated, we do want to win for the future, but we think we can win now. So there is some level of confidence that they're going to be better than maybe what the outside world thinks is going to be. And I'm in it, and I'm for it, and I'm behind it. But I also am looking at it going, it is baked in that it's going to be up and down. There's just no chance with this many changes in this league that they go 14-3. Like, that's just not in my world happening. But I'll hear them out on the inner building self-confidence that seems to be building if you listen to them.
Well, when they talk about, I don't think they're really thinking they can go out there and, I think they have a slightly more realistic look at the roster right now, and knowing that there's still some questions to say, I think it's as much, there's no reason why you can't go out and you try to win every game. I mean, that's what you try to do. You should never go into a season saying, yes, we're just tearing it down and we're going to whatever. You've got to go out there and compete. But I do think, to your point, Bram, I think that the way Daniels has looked, and I think, to be honest, I think the way guys like Zach Ertz and Eckler have looked gives them maybe a little bit better sense that they could do more than what they would have thought 6 months ago.
You know, the other thing too, and Quinn's talked about this, and I see it. We talked about this a week ago, and I see it. Like, I don't know what chemistry is. I don't know how to define it, but you know it when you see it. And through this first month, 6 weeks, whatever it is, till we've gotten to this point, it's grown and it exists. It's like obvious in the way that they interact with each other, in the way that they're cheering for each other at the end of preseason games, and that is infectious. And this is what Quinn's talking about from the get-go, that he wants this. And Peters, I thought the line of the week a week ago was, we're not collecting talent, we're trying to build a team here.
Right.
And I think they see it, they feel it, they feel like they've gotten off to the right start. And I agree with them on all of that. The reality is this league's really hard, and it's not feel-good stories most of the time. You get bludgeoned by better rosters. So let's see what happens when they get out there. But I think that's why this confidence is building, that they don't think this is we'll just see what happens and hopefully we get better and Jayden gets off to a good start. I think they genuinely, I could feel it from them. They genuinely feel like they're going to be competitive this year, to whatever that word means to them.
Yeah. And I think they should feel that way. Like I think they should feel that way, because there's been enough signs to point like maybe they don't win certain games. But I was looking at Houston, and the schedule here is tougher. So that's part of the issue. And the Texans went 4-2 in their division. These guys have to do well in the division to get to that point. But they did, but they were competitive. After the first game or two, they were in, pretty much every game. So that to me is what they need to show. And listen, even the last couple of years, up until last year, that team I felt like was pretty resilient. But now I think you just have a better guy behind center who can maybe be the difference in some of those games, but also just a better coached team overall. And that will make a difference too. So that's the thing I'm most interested to see, Bram, is the impact of the coaching on the secondary, on the D line, because I don't think that those groups I'll be honest, I don't know that any of those groups last year were coached well enough. And so I think that's what I'm curious to see. And I would say the O-line too. Like, I don't think they had a good O-line coach last year. I mean, it was so many places where you could say that. And so, like, what's the impact of that? Those are the things we don't know. So when it's funny, because, you start talking about season predictions, all that, and I kind of always go to that 7-win range, only because I don't know how these other things are going to play out. And I think you can have, if you're a fan, you can have faith that's like, you can create that scenario that this is going to work because of this. I get it, and I do that with the teams that I would root for, right? You want to see the best. But I think even if you get to that 7, you're competitive, and the arrow's going up with the quarterback, with the whole thing, you can go in the offseason feeling pretty damn good. But I also know, Bram, like, I don't, what's the ceiling for this team? We don't know. I think, to be honest, I think that's kind of the fun part. We don't know for this year. I like what they're doing long-term. For this year, you don't know, because the impact, we just haven't seen it in a game.
We don't know that. Right. I've landed on for months. Like, I think the bottom line is we're excited about what the ceiling is. And a lot of that's going to have to do with, what does Jayden Daniels look like? We know this comes down to quarterback play, and he feels very ahead of schedule. There's not been a single day throughout this entire process where he looked like a rookie to me. Like, that's a really good sign, like a really, really, really good sign. So does that mean that they go out and have a Houston-like season? I don't know. Like, we'll find out. Like, no idea. Right. And I will go back to something you said too, about the coaching on the secondary, because I think it's immense. Like, this is a specialty for them. They have been really, really, really good at building turnover machines. And they've done really, really, really well with corners. And in this case, the vulnerable unit, to me, I think to everybody, it looks like it, but maybe it isn't. And if their coaching and their system helps unlock Emmanuel Forbes, makes Benjamin St. Juste a better player, makes Mike Sanders still a playmaker day one, if that stuff starts happening, then I think their defense is underrated nationally, because I love what's happening in between the hash marks. Alan Payne. We haven't even seen Newton yet.
Right.
Don't know. Wagner Luvu, biggest upgrade of the team is the linebacking core. By far, not close. Chin Martin. The inside the hash marks screams to me on paper, and then what I've seen, stout, difficult to run on, really good. Where we're worried is on the edges. Well, what if the coaching helps our secondary become a step up from what it was, or it helps these corners get better? And Emmanuel Forbes, gives up some plays, but also ends up with 5 or 6 interceptions because that's the history of this staff. Like, if that stuff starts happening, then this defense has an opportunity to be good, better than people think it's going to be. And if that's the case, then all of a sudden, Jayden Daniels doesn't have to be CJ Stroud or superstar-ish in year one. He just has to be good enough. And the thing that really stands out to me, and the coaches were talking about this, he doesn't turn the ball over. I mean, like, he doesn't put the ball in harm's way. He makes smart decisions with it. So all of that adds up to, again, I don't want to get ahead of myself, but like very promising, and part of probably why the coaching staff and everybody inside is looking around going, you know what? This might not be a typical year one. We might be a little better than everyone thinks we're going to be.
Yes. And I think that can be the case. And the funny thing is, like with Daniels and going into Robert's rookie year, I remember went on the radio, I think it was with the Junkies, and they were asking about him, like, I don't see how this kid's going to fail this year. Like, I felt like he looked really good, right? And so I kind of feel the same way with Daniels, but even more so, because I think he's more built for long-term success based on his approach, based on what we hear, his leadership skills, his people skills, and the way he works. So I think he's just built better for long-term success. And I was talking to Zach Ertz about this, and he's like, I think he thinks he's going to be good, not down the road, but right away. And when you have guys like that saying it, and they don't have to say it to that effect, they can say, we've gone through this with Terry McLaurin for like every year he's been here. What do you think of the new quarterback? And, they give the same answers, like, oh, I really like him. It can be this and that. But there's a different level of enthusiasm when you're talking to them. And I mean, you talk to these people with the tape recorders off, what they're saying privately and publicly, right? It doesn't change. And so I think that's where the number one reason for excitement has to start for this organization and the fan base is with number 5. And I don't know, Bram. I've seen enough young guys to feel pretty good in saying Jayden Daniels is going to be pretty good.
Yeah, I think so too. And until we see him play, and I always talk about this, until I see him in the fourth quarter of a tie game have to convert a 3rd and 6 and see how he performs in those moments, it's really hard to know. And then it's one thing to do it against Tampa on Sunday in week 1, and it's another thing to do it against Atlanta in week 17 when you have to win.
And here's
let's all let that play out and see what happens there. Because I don't really know. The other thing that really stands out to me that I like is they clearly have a profile. They talked about this. And again, this wasn't coach speak. They have a profile of types of players that they're looking for to play for them. And a lot of these guys that made the team and some that were traded, seems to fit this profile. Like Terry McLaurin's not only a good receiver, he's a tough receiver. I am not surprised for a second De'Ami Brown has emerged with this staff because he's a tough player, a physical player, who's a willing participant on special teams. And oh, by the way, might be able to make plays down the field. I knew they'd fall in love with Brian Robinson. Go watch the guy run. Like, I knew they would fall in love with him. I know why they like Eckler. It's not just that he could be an explosive player. He's tough. Like, go look at the defensive players that they go for. They like physical toughness. If you show those traits, you will stand out to them. I like it too. Like, all of these things are adding up to, and this is what I think what I'm most optimistic about. Coaches come in, GMs come in, people come in, and you hear it. And at this point, for how long you and I have both covered this and been around it, I've heard it all. Okay. There's nothing you can say to me, at least from the coach speak language, that you see it all. But when it's not just talk and it's carrying over on the field, and it's carrying over on the field. And that's the good news. Now, they haven't lost a game yet. And the team they're playing on Sunday happened to be in the playoffs last year. And in my opinion, is going to win that division again, because I think they're the best team in that division. And they were 1 score away from being in the NFC Championship last year. So we're going to find out real quick. And as much as they don't know what Washington's going to do, which I think is a huge advantage here, I do know who that head coach is and what kind of heat he brings. And I'm sure he's licking his chops at a rookie quarterback in
For
week
sure.
1 who's never played before. So
Right.
this is going to be an interesting first test for everybody.
Well, that's the thing. And I agree with that. And that's where the big thing you don't know with Jayden Daniels, that because Tampa, that I've started the process today, Bram, of going through all, I want to go through a lot of their blitzes last year to see what they do, how they attack guys. They're going to blitz on any down. They're going to send guys small over, but they're really good sending guys up the middle and creating pressure, 3-on-2s, 2-on-1s, et cetera. That's where the quarterback's going to have to know what to do. And they're doing a pretty good job of trying to take away your target. So that's going to be the challenge for Jayden Daniels. How does he handle that pressure? And he's done really well. Like you said earlier, he takes care of the ball. He did that in college. He can also make you pay if you don't pinch and keep him in the pocket. He'll make you pay, because if he gets out and you're in man, he's going to run a long way. But I think that's the key. Not just how he handles it, but how Eckler and when Robinson's in the game, how they handle the pickups, because that's going to be another key for them too. That's a really good defense, and they have a couple good young pass rushers. I love Winfield. I always enjoy watching him play. It's a good defense against the run. So I think that's going to be a big challenge right away. And I'm also curious, Bram, like, what's the impact on Anthony Lynn and Brian Johnson in the run game, and Bobby Johnson too?
Yeah.
Right. How do they develop or evolve Kingsbury's game and the play, and how does Kingsbury call a game to protect Daniels and helping him get rid of the ball quick? Right. So I think there's a lot of things that there's just so much intrigue, just not with the game, but the season, because there's a lot of things that we need to learn. I think it's going to be fun to watch how this goes. So the other thing too, Bram, what I don't know is you brought up Johnny Newton. We haven't seen the guy practice. Like, yeah. I don't know what kind of impact, when he can make an impact. And then Brandon Coleman, now we expect him back. He'll be out there tomorrow, should be out there. But where on the depth chart, they had him with the starters. To me, that's asking a lot for a young guy who has missed a few weeks. At least he was there in the spring, and at least he could go through the walkthroughs and do all that stuff, because it was a shoulder injury, not the leg. So he can do all that stuff. Maybe that helps him, but it's also asking a lot in your first game. You've missed a few weeks to do that. But I'm less worried about him because he's at least been out there. Newton hasn't been out there, and not in the spring and very little in the summer.
Yeah. I mean, I just have no opinion on him at this point, because I just haven't seen him do anything. I know, what his reputation was. All the draft analyst people were all very high on that. They got a deal that he's the best interior pass rushing defensive lineman on the board, and they were lucky to get him in the second round. And, we'll see. I think it's hard for me to say anything about him, because I just haven't seen him do anything yet. So I don't want to.
I just think it's among the questions. It's funny. So there are a couple of things topics I want to address, because people asking and all that. One is with the running backs, the splits. It's going to be this is pretty basic. It's Robinson is your primary runner. Eckler's your third down guy. This was never a who's going to be the main back kind of situation. They have roles. They like Robinson. And I think Robinson, both of them, but Robinson with Daniels with the zone read threat. Well, we saw with Alfred Morris with that, and I don't know how much they're going to do that, but they are going to use it, or the RPOs, whatever. But the threat of the quarterback created arm tackles for Alfred Morris all over the place. He also did great at setting up blockers and defenders, right? So, but Robinson in the preseason, he was getting some holes because of the looks that they were sending, and I think that's one thing to see. And then the other thing too, Bram, is the depth chart came out today, and he had Luke McCaffrey was one of 3 receivers listed as a starter. I think they list more than 11 guys as a starter, but they listed him as a starter. We don't know how it's all going to play out. They had he and Zacchaeus along with McLaurin. They're all going to play a role. De'Ami Brown's going to have a role. So I don't know that it matters who's on there or not. They're all going to play a role because, like you said, Brown fills a role in the run game and is a deep threat. McCaffrey, you brought up the physical stuff. That's why he's in the slot. He can be I don't know that he's going to be a make you miss at the top of the route guy, but he can play physical and create that way, right? And So I think there's, so I don't know. I put a lot of stock into, who's listed on the depth chart, because they've already made it clear they're going to use them all.
I care about left tackle. I'd like that one I care about.
Yeah, sure.
Receiver stuff though, when they the whole, there is no number 2, 3, 4. I believe that here. Like if you go look at the profile of the receivers that they have, outside of McLaurin, who is a clear number 1 target, like with the rest of them, I also don't see it that way. Zacchaeus could be inside, outside. He could play on any series. Brown could be outside and he could be a tell for run plays because he's so physical, or he's a downfield threat. McCaffrey in the slot makes a lot of sense to me. Like Pringle getting time on the field, Crowder getting time on the field. I don't know about Noah Brown yet. I think that's a little too soon to probably figure that part out. But either one of them getting time on the field because of their physical play, specifically Pringle, wouldn't surprise me at all. So I buy into they're doing this by committee and don't get caught up in the numbers. But I would like to know who's starting at left tackle. I would like to know that one.
Yeah, for sure. And then Dr. Wonderful brought up that he brought the corners, the outside corners. I'm going to say outside because Sam was still inside. I think people are going to love that guy. But the outside was St. Juste and Forbes. His concern is the concern is that what if it was the players and not the coaching? Don't know, Doc. Don't know. And I think we're going to find that out. That is a concern because I don't know that if we're in 2025, are both those guys going to be here starting? I would not bet on that. And
let's go back to the spring and before free agency, before the draft. What were the 2 things that everybody said that they thought they would probably address, whether by money with the cap space or in the draft? Potentially a number 1 corner and a tackle. And they didn't really do either one of those things. They clearly didn't. They brought in Michael Davis, but that was a free agent signing, but not a top tier one, right? So they brought in competition. They brought in Igbenogany, competition, not a high priced free agent type of thing. They did draft Sanders still. At tackle though, they didn't really go the route I thought they would, which was maybe not pay the high price, because I actually agree, looking at the marketplace, that I wouldn't have paid the price for the tackles that were available. But they also didn't go get another veteran to try to bridge the gap. So these are 2. Let's see how that one plays out. And we talked about this earlier. Are they better off in the secondary with coaching? I'll buy it because they have a history of doing it. Are they going to be fine on the offensive line by doing what they did? We'll see. And, I'm rooting and hoping for Brandon Coleman, but here's another player who might start on Sunday, who didn't play a snap in the preseason, taking on a well-versed, long-time, blitz-happy defensive coordinator. This is going to be very interesting this Sunday.
Oh, for sure. And I think, but again, we'll learn a lot about him because one of the things we keep hearing about Daniels throughout the summer, and just being around him and watching him, it's poise, calm, the accuracy, the quick release. Those are the elements that help you beat a blitz. Now, can you do that in your first game? That's asking a lot. And so we'll see. But it's not like Kingsbury hasn't drawn up a game plan for a young rookie quarterback against a good team before. So I think it's his first game. It's not theirs. So I think that definitely helps. So I think that's why, you can look at it and say, okay, there's all that going on. And then it's a road game too. So I think it's a good test for a young guy, but it's also that competitors like Daniels just thrive in these kind of situations. Like when he was a freshman at Arizona State, watching, it's funny because in the draft prep, I watched some of his games I'm sure you did too, as a rookie, as a freshman at ASU.
Yeah.
And the kid competed. I mean, he was fun to watch, and he took care of the ball then too, but he competed. So when you're a competitor, these are the situations that you really, really kind of love. So I'm expecting a lot from him. Maybe not just, I don't know about Sunday, but overall and for his career, just because being around that and seeing other guys who've passed through here, he's different. So I think it'll be a good first test for him, but I think that'll be fun to watch. But the other part of it, Bram, too, is how long does it take? I felt like one of the things I felt like with the previous coaching staff, it took them too long to adjust to what they had. I felt like they didn't always know what they had in certain players. How much more do these guys know about certain guys to know how to use them or when not to use them more specifically? So I think that's going to be that's something. I think it'll be more, but we'll find out.
Yeah, we'll find out. I agree. I felt that the last staff was slow to adjust with certain people, and we'll see until they also are getting tested here too, and we'll just have to see. But I'm an optimistic person, so I always kind of like what I see by the end of this point. But this one does feel different to me, and I'll just go back to where we kind of started, which was I really don't know what's going to happen, but I do feel like something good has started here. And I don't know what that turns into, but it feels right. It feels like it's heading in the right direction. I'm not, jumping to any conclusions or they're going to have a Houston season or we're going to be talking about them taking off in year 2, but because I need to see it and I want to see it, but I do feel good about where things are. And I do feel good about where things are going. And I keep thinking about, Adam Peters and Lance Newmark both talking last week. And I thought about their history. And Peters was in New England during the dynasty years of Brady. Then he goes to Denver and then they win. And then he goes to San Francisco and then they win. And Newmark's been in Detroit for a very long time, but he knows what winning looks like over the last few years. And it started happening. And them both just kind of saying it out loud. It makes me feel confident too that they like what they see. Do they like their team a little too much? I don't know. I guess we'll find out. But I like what I see too. I feel good about it. I feel like the chemistry's there. I feel like all the team stuff is there. And I have loved what Jayden has shown here early. And I can't wait to see it in a real game Sunday.
And I do think there's an element like Bob, and we've got about 1 or 2 more minutes here, but Bob in Arizona says he's had enough Kool-Aid over the last 25 years. Show him first. And I don't blame it. There has to be a good element or a large segment of the fan base or segment of the fan base that feels that way because for the same, I get it. But I do think I think there are elements that are different, but you still have to show it on the field. And so I do like right now where I think they're headed for the next 5 years, but that I don't know what that means for this year. And I do agree with Bob in Arizona that you've still got to show it on the field. We can sit here and talk, we can do all that. But you have to show it on the field. But I also say, Bram, it's going to take a minute to get it where people really want it, where you can say, okay, now you go. And I think listen, if you have a good year, then they have money to spend in the off season. They have, other draft picks. Then you can start to say now you can really build something, but you got to go show it first. So that's the thing. Oh, by the way, for everybody, before I forget, for you gold members, I will have Santana Moss on the private Zoom on Friday night. Still working out the time in that 7 to 8 o'clock range. But Santana Moss joining Bram, the gold members on a private Zoom. So that'll be fun. Santana's great. Bram, you got any?
Yeah, I'll give you one name.
Yeah, there you go. You got any parting thoughts?
I'm going to give you one name. Yeah, one name I'm going to throw at you because we have a bunch of surprising players, I think that we're hoping are going to take the world by storm Sunday. Jayden Daniels, Mike Sandra still, Ben Sinnott, see how much he actually plays here. Brandon Coleman's going to pop up there. I'm probably starting there's one guy for Tampa that I've heard about already that they're keeping very quiet, but I've already heard from their people. Jalen McMillan was a third-round pick out of Washington. Yep. I think overshadowed because Roma Dunze was on that team. But he's a burner. And inside of Godwin and Evans, he could be a problem. So this is going to be your comments, your questions, and your support of this show. So I'll be back on Thursday morning with four of my beat reporter buddies and from more season talk about the Washington Commanders as we finally, Bram, enter week 1. Thanks a lot. And I'll talk to you next time.